What's up guys, Bajheera here, bringing you my patch 7.1.5 Arms Warrior PvP guide. Now, similar to my Fury Warrior PvP guide, I know this video is coming a little bit late in the patch, but the reason for that is I've been playing Arms Warrior, pretty much all of Legion, and during a fair amount of patch 7.1.5, Arms Warriors were pretty much unplayable. But now that they've received some of the buffs that they've needed to become a class that is relatively viable in 3v3 Arena, I feel like now would be a good time to step back into playing a little bit of Arms and share some of the insight that I've acquired with you guys as well. So before we get into any specifics, Arms Warrior in general is an extremely consistent damage dealing class with a fair amount of offensive and defensive utility for its teammates. Now, it doesn't have a whole lot of self-healing and isn't an especially mobile class, but what it does well, it allows it to be effective in a 3v3 arena standpoint. And although Arms can be fun in Battlegrounds, 3v3 Arena is where I think Arms really shines, so that's kind of what I'm going to be focusing on when I'm talking about talent choices or ways that you use your abilities for this guide. Once again, we'll start with your basic rotational abilities as an Arms Warrior. A lot of times you're going to be starting your rotation with a Colossus Smash, an ability that deals a fair amount of damage but also increases the amount of damage that your target will take from all of your abilities after that. You'll usually follow that up with a Mortal Strike, which is another one of those abilities that's going to be dealing most of your damage, but also applying your Mortal Strike effect, which reduces the healing that your target takes. So a lot of times you're going to be wanting to keep Colossus Smash up on your target, and keep that Mortal Strike debuff on your target as well. You're going to be wanting to hit these abilities pretty much whenever they're available. Slam is going to be one of your single target fillers, and Whirlwind is an example of one of your AoE fillers. Not an ability I press too often in PvP, but sometimes has its usefulness in doing AoE damage or maybe knocking rogues out of stealth, something like that. Of course, Execute is the ability intended to finish off your opponents. In Legion, hasn't always been doing that, but definitely is at least worth giving a try. And Tactician is one of your passives, where spending Rage sometimes resets the remaining cooldown on Colossus Smash. It's a little, like, we'll go into the actual calculation as we look at the more full abilities page here in just a moment. Now this is going to give us an opportunity to take a look at some of our offensive and defensive cooldowns, as well as any other abilities that we may have missed. For example, Avatar. It is a talent that is a massive offensive cooldown. The Root Break is great, but the 20% damage is even better. Just a nice burst cooldown that you can use to force pressure in any sort of PvP situation. Battle Cry, once again, it's going to make all of your abilities crit. This is on a 1-minute cooldown by default. Just going to be one of those basic cooldowns that's going to allow you to force pressure. Those are your big two offensive cooldowns that you can use. Berserker Rage is going to be that Fear, Sap, Incapacitate, Break effect on a 1-minute cooldown. Blade Storm. Now, Blade Storm is, unlike Fury, baseline for Arms Warriors. Once again, it's one of those things that can break you out of roots. You can avoid CC with it, and it definitely does a lot of damage, especially when you have Colossus Smash up. Of course, charges your basic mobility, generates rage, slows your opponent for 6 seconds after rooting them, which is really, really nice. Cleave, this is one of those ways that you can make your Whirlwind do more damage. Once again, Cleave is not something that I'm going to have as part of my primary PvP rotation, but if you're in a situation like you're stacked up with a ton of pets from a Demonology Warlock or an Unholy DK, sometimes some Cleave Whirlwind with cooldowns can actually do a little bit of single target damage as well, which is pretty nice. Colossus Smash, we already talked about this. This is one of those abilities that you're going to want to press pretty much off cooldown, I find. Not only is it going to make you deal more damage with all of your abilities, it deals a fair amount of damage on its own. And if we want to take a quick look at our artifact weapon, you'll notice that you benefit from the effect of Shattered Defenses, where after using Colossus Smash, your next Mortal Strike or Execute gain 30% increased critical strike chance and deals 30% additional damage. Now, I don't really want to go through all of the artifact weapon talents because I've done that in videos in the past, and if you guys are playing in Arms or Fury Warrior, I definitely recommend that you take the time to read through your artifact weapon talents, because they do have a big effect on certain abilities and the way that you're going to play the class. For example, your Battle Cry, thanks to Corrupted Blood of Zakaj, deals 20% additional damage as shadow damage during that cooldown. Now, I have made some videos going over artifact weapon talents and things like that you can check out, but to get back to business on our actual abilities, we can look at Commanding Shout. We discussed this a little bit in the Fury guide, where it gives you and your allies within 30 yards of you 15% additional health, and that'll help you escape some tricky situations by giving you just a little bit more health to survive. Next up, we have Defensive Stance, which is a talent, but it is a talent that I recommend. It allows you to make use of defensive stance, which reduces all incoming damage you take by 20%, but you do reduce the damage that you deal by 10%. But I think that trade-off is a lot of times worth it. But you can swap back and forth between battle and defensive stance. Keep in mind there was a 10-second cooldown on that. Die by the sword, this is your main defensive cooldown. It's on a 3-minute cooldown, so use it wisely. But it's because it's a fairly strong cooldown, especially against melee. It increases your parry chance by 100%, so you'll parry all incoming attacks. And it also reduces all damage you take by 35% for 8 seconds. So it's useful against casters to defend, have that 35% damage mitigation, but it is extremely useful against melee classes where you'll parry all attacks against you. Execute, we already talked about this. Sometimes it attempts, keyword, to finish off a foe, dealing pathetic damage and leaving you very unsatisfied with the damage that it usually deals, but never know, sometimes it crits and it's nice damage. But I'm a little salty about execute. I had somebody recently survive 10 executes and lost the game as a result of it in the threes match, so I'm still stinging from that. But anyway, execute's still the ability that you want to use, just especially if you Colossus Smash, then execute with a fair amount of rage, you'll probably get some good damage on that. Hamstring is your single target, 10 rage, on global cooldown, basic slow. You're going to do a little bit of damage and slow your opponent by 50%. Heroic Leap is another one of your mobility cooldowns on a 45-second cooldown by default. Allows you to leap 40 yards on a targeted location, deal a little bit of damage where you land. Heroic Throw, once again, one of those abilities that's not going to deal a lot of damage, but it is helpful for keeping people in combat to stop drink, to stop a re-stealth, or maybe to kill totems sometimes, or kill Siphines. Intimidating Shout, your baseline AoE CC. A lot of times it's going to be able to set up CC for your team, or fill gaps in crowd control. This is your big CD. It's on a 1.5-minute cooldown. Make use of that wisely, because you can definitely force some pressure with a big CC like that. Mortal Strike, talked about that. Deals a fair amount of damage whenever the Mortal Wounds debuff is on a target. It does reduce the healing that target takes by 25%. Overpower, this is a talent, but it's a talent I recommend. Deals a fair amount of damage and has a big chance to crit. It also cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried, which is very, very nice. Pummel, this is what you use to interrupt spellcast. Slam, this is our little filler ability. Stormbolt, this is a talent that oftentimes I will recommend, and we'll go through that within our talents. Taunt, just like I talked about in the Fury guide, this is one of those ways that you can use pets to your advantage, either to pull them off your teammates or break CC on you, or taunt the pet closer to you so you can land shockwaves that incorporate the pet in them as well. Victory Rush, whenever you get a killing blow, you get that extra healing, which is really, really nice. You got to live for these as an arms warrior. Warbreaker, this is your offensive ability that is granted to you by your artifact. Does a big AoE, and it also applies Colossus Smash to all nearby enemies. So a Warbreaker into a Blade Storm and a big crowd of people, oh, this is juicy damage. Whirlwind, less juicy damage, but it's another AoE. And then, of course, you have your Mastery. Colossal Might increases the damage of your Colossus Smash by a certain percentage and causes it to increase the damage you deal to the target by an additional percent damage. Now, in PvP, this is only about 20, whereas in PvE, it's like 80 or something like that. So, Colossus Smash definitely still important to always keep up on your targets. It makes you deal more damage. But the more Mastery you have, the more that ability deals, and the more the effect is, increased by. And then you have Tactician, where you have a 0.75% chance per rage spent to reset the remaining cooldown on Colossus Smash and Mortal Strike. You live and die by these Tactician procs, so you gotta hope that they serve you well. All right, and with our abilities out of the way, now we can get to the fun part, talent discussion. So I think a lot of times this talent setup right here is going to get you through a lot of situations just fine. This is the talent setup that I've been using for most of patch 7.1.5, and I'll explain to you why talent by talent. So Overpower, it is a nice high damage ability that goes through any sort of mitigation like dodge, block, or parry, and has an extra chance to crit. Really, really nice ability. Stormbolt, reliable stun. Avatar, strong, powerful, offensive cooldown. Defensive stance, just another one of those defensive talents that you're going to want to take. Reduces the damage that is dealt to you by 20% in exchange for you dealing 10% less damage. A good trade, in my opinion. Mortal Combo is the talent choice that I decide to use here. I think the consistent damage and the control that you have, especially when paired with the PvP talent Sharpen Blade, is really, really nice. And Titanic Might is a talent that used to have a drawback in terms of the effectiveness of Colossus Smash, but now just extends the duration of your Colossus Smash. And since you're using Overpower Mortal Combo, you don't usually run into rage issues, so Deadly Calm isn't really required. And then Opportunity Strikes just follows that same pattern of dealing ultra consistent damage, and especially as your opponent becomes lower and lower health, you'll proc that more often. So just to reiterate, the purpose of this particular build is just consistent damage. You'll take a look at Overpower and Colossus Smash and Mortal Strike and notice that they pretty much all deal the same amount of damage, something like 250, 260k damage, just baseline. And that's I mean, out in the world, but in Arena, they're all going to deal similar damage anyway, and then Opportunity Strikes is just one of those ways to fit in another bit of consistent damage during an Arena match. Keep in mind, that's just one build that you can use. Another fun one incorporates the first tier talent, Sweeping Strikes. Sweeping Strikes is a talent that you might want to consider. It is a whole lot of fun to hit different targets with your Mortal Strike. It'll stack up your damage quickly, and having that AoE Mortal Strike effect is really, really nice. You'll see I went Shockwave for this, so this is like a spec that I play a lot of times in BGs, but basically the main thing that you need to consider is realize that Sweeping Strikes is an option. Like if you're fighting a melee cleave, definitely like Sweeping Strike, Shockwave, something you should definitely consider. Rend, not necessary. You can always just go Avatar and then do the same talent setup down here. So you're going to have Mortal Strikes that you're cleaving with Mortal Combo, Titanic Might, Opportunity Strikes, all that's good stuff. You also have another option, which is Focused Rage. So Focused Rage is a talent setup that I think I used last season, last patch, and liked it, but I don't think it's necessarily quite as good as the Overpower and Mortal Combo setup. But if you wanted to play Focused Rage, and you can still, I recommend going with something like Dauntless. Dauntless plus Focused Rage and Deadly Calm Anger Management. You'll notice that when we play either of these with Mortal Combo, you usually don't ever have any rage issues with Mortal Combo Overpower, so that's where Titanic Might can come into play. But with Focused Rage, you're definitely going to want Deadly Calm, and if you're going to be spending all that rage anyway with Deadly Calm and Focused Rage, you may as well go Anger Management as well to make that cooldown come back up faster. The Anger Management, if you didn't know, is going to make your Battle Cry come back up more quickly. So these two talents together with Focused Rage and Dauntless are really, really nice if you want to do that build. So there's basically three builds. There's the single target standard, right? Cleave spec, where you take Sweeping Strikes. You don't have to go Rend if you don't want to, but I think that does add to the general cleaviness of the build. Or you can go with Focused Rage, where you're going to be changing from Mortal Combo to Focused Rage, and from Titanic Might to Deadly Calm, and from Opportunity Strikes to Anger Management, and from one of these to Dauntless. And of course, it's your talent setup. You do whatever you want. You mix and match. I just wanted to give you guys some idea of the build. And I have this as PvE Focused Rage, so obviously Bounding Shrine is not necessary. But you'll notice when I have Monk equals Dead, it's a very similar setup. So if I was planning on chasing a Mystery Monk around, this is what that might look like. So just keep that in mind, that there's different useful talent setups for different situations, but this is the one that I'll generally use. And then we'll swap over to my honor talents, where you'll see I also have a couple different setups. And by the way, this add-on is called Talent Set Manager. It's pretty nice. But once again, my standard arena defensive utility is going to be Relentless because I'm an orc. I mean, all these trinkets are reasonable choices in certain situations. But as an orc, I'll go Relentless. I'm a human. A lot of times I'll go Gladiator's Medallion. Just like we talked about in the Fury Guide, if you're fighting things that are not pure melee physical damage, then you might want to go Reinforced Armor. Sparring is really good if you are facing things that are basically doing a lot of physical melee damage. Disarm is, if you can benefit from Disarm, go for it. If you're fighting only casters and Disarm doesn't matter, then go Death Sentence. Same thing with Spell Reflection. If you're facing things that you need to Spell Reflect, that's a good option. If you're not, then you can go Short Rally and Cry. Now, this next talent tier is an interesting one. It really has to do with offensive and defensive utility. And the first one on the list is Pain Train, which reduces the cooldown of your Battle Cry by 15 seconds and also makes it apply to your teammates. So you'll notice that synergizes really well with our Focused Rage setup, where you're going to have Anger Management already, so your Battle Cry can be on a very, very short cooldown. So if you are going to use that Focused Rage setup, consider using that talent. Another really good one, and probably the sort of baseline one I would say, is Duel. Duel makes it so that you use Duel on a target, and if you are the target attack anybody else, you're going to be dealing half damage to any target except for each other. So you're going to be using this on a target that you're attacking and forcing that target to either hit you or deal dramatically reduced damage. You also have War Banner. which is an interesting one in the fact that it throws down a banner and it gives you movement speed, but the main thing is it reduces all incoming crowd control effects by 50%. So this is a talent that you might want to use in a situation where you can envision a long CC chain on your healer, like think Ret Hunter Priest, something like that, where you're going to have a Hodge into Trap into Fear. Throwing down a War Banner is going to make all those CCs reduced by half. The problem is that War Banner is a long cooldown and it can be killed. So it's kind of a easy way to have a long cooldown be wasted if they just are aware of it and kill it. Whereas Duel is something that you're going to be able to use every 25 seconds, and even if it's not quite as powerful as CC reduction, it's a little bit more reliable in the fact that you can't really get rid of it unless they decided to bop it, which would be a horrible use of cooldowns and definitely in your favor. So Warbanner is something to consider in certain situations. Just understand the weakness of it as well, which is what makes me generally use Duel as the talent that I choose in this tier. Your next talent choices are a little bit more offensive. For example, Storm of Destruction makes your Blade Storm a much shorter cooldown and also applies mortal wounds. While Shadow of the Colossus can be fun, it's the one I've probably used the least since 7.1.5, and Sharpened Blade is the one that I pretty much have used very, very consistently. I like Sharpened Blade when it was a long cooldown, and I only wished it was a shorter cooldown, and now it is. Now it's also slightly nerfed in that it only increases your Mortal Strike effect to 50% instead of 70%, but it's still really good, and it makes your Mortal Strikes hit harder. So going through PvP talents, that is pretty much the setup that I recommend. I mean, once again, these are your talents, you do what you want, but I definitely recommend that you understand what these do, understand when they're going to be effective, and then use them intuitively off of that. So that's pretty much the setup for talents. Hopefully you guys understand the builds and whatnot, because we're not done yet. I definitely want to go through some rotational stuff with you guys as well to show you guys how I like to deal damage as an Arms Warrior and how to make you guys deal damage that's as effective as it can be. As an Arms Warrior, the basic things that you're thinking about are Colossus Smash into Mortal Strike into Overpower, and then slamming until you have another Colossus Smash or Mortal Strike to use or Overpower to use. That's pretty much the priority system, is charging in there, Colossus Smash, Mortal Strike, Overpower. Then at this point you can slam a little bit until Mortal Strike's back up, and that's pretty much the life that you're going to live, and hopefully reset your Colossus Smash and just keep that rolling, because with Titanic Might, you don't really have to save Colossus Smash to make sure that you're going to be able to use it and be able to keep Colossus Smash up, because it's a 16-second duration. So you may as well use Colossus Smash every time you can, followed up immediately by a Mortal Strike, or I suppose by an Execute if they're that low. And then from there you're just going to want to have a priority system of Overpower, and then Slam if you have nothing else available. That's pretty much how it works. But once again, if your priority system is, Execute notwithstanding, if you have Execute, I think your priority system is Colossus Smash Execute. I still think Colossus Smash is the #1 priority, but how it looks is Colossus Smash, Mortal Strike until you have no more Mortal Strikes. But I got a Colossus Smash proc, so I'm going to Colossus Smash the Mortal Strike, then I'm going to Overpower, then I'm going to Mortal Strike, then I'm going to Colossus Smash because I got a proc, then I'm going to Mortal Strike. Now I don't have I can wait another global to get another Mortal Strike, then I have Overpower. Now I don't have anything to do. Now I can finally Slam, which is going to get me another Colossus Smash, into a Mortal Strike, into a Mortal Strike, into a couple more Slams. So you get the idea, and if ever Execute's on the table, you're definitely going to want to Colossus Smash before, and then Execute, because a lot of times, if you just reach for Execute, I really feel like it doesn't kill stuff. But I guess if you have a Colossus Smash up and enough rage, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and try to Execute and just hope for the best there. But if you can, I think Colossus Smash into Execute is going to give you a better chance at killing. But that right there is the priority system. And then when it comes to Arms Warrior Burst, you're basically just keeping the same principles of your normal rotation, just with the inclusion of Battle Cry. So you charge in, pop Battle Cry, and then Colossus Smash, Mortal Strike, Overpower, and then, apply the rotational principles from there. Where things get interesting, though, is how you decide to use Sharpened Blade. So depending on what composition you're playing, Sharpened Blade can either begin a CC chain, fill a gap in a CC chain, or finish a CC chain. So in a comp I guess, or create its own CC, basically. So in a comp like Turbo Cleave, for example, basically will be able to pop cooldowns anytime your shaman begins to get procs or lands a wind shear or something like that, in which case you might just want to pop all your cooldowns and use Sharpen Blade instantly to make damage that is already really hard to heal through almost impossible to heal through with the additional 50% Mortal Strike effect. Another situation is when you're playing a comp like Warrior Mage Druid. You might want to start your CC chain with a Fear, and then into a stun, and then your mage is able to maybe land 3 polymorphs, and at the very end of it all, the healer's like, finally, I can land some heals on my teammate, and then you finish off that CC chain with a Sharpened Blade on the target that you're trying to kill, which makes it even harder for the healer to recover from that long CC chain. So things like that are basically the way that you're going to creatively use Sharpened Blade as an arms warrior. But your rotation, I feel like, is mostly pretty simple in terms of the priority system. I guess Execute, like we said, can complicate it a little bit, where if Execute is available, you're probably going to want to use that. But Colossus Smash, Mortal Strike, Overpower, Slam is pretty much the way that I would think of it. Now, Overpower is like, deals a lot of damage. The reason why I put Overpower in front, or behind Mortal Strike in terms of importance is because if you get a Colossus Smash reset, Mortal Strike's going to come back up, and I mean, that's one of your highest damaging abilities, so keep that in mind. You're not usually going to have Overpower procs fall off if you don't use them, so don't worry about that. But that's pretty much the way that your rotation looks, and Sharpened Blade is really where the creativity comes in, especially when paired with the CC that your composition has. And since we're already talking about 3v3 arena comps, let's go ahead and break down the best comps for Arms Warrior, in my opinion. Now, the best composition that I've seen for Warriors in 3v3 Arena is Warrior Mage Healer. That can be Warrior Mage Druid or even Warrior Mage Paladin are probably the best options that you have. A lot of times with an Arms Warrior, you're going to go Arms Warrior Fire Mage. I think the combination of those two classes with their very consistent damage eventually is going to be able to wear people down with CC and Burst, but the main thing is just grind them up with damage. That being said, I think Frost Mage is probably also a really good option, especially against Demonology Warlocks, which, in my opinion, are one of the most annoying classes to fight in Arena right now. But Frost Mages do really well against them, since they can AoE with their Orb of Frost, and also can reduce the cooldown on Orb of Frost by casting Blizzard on all the 80 billion imps that are cluttering the field. So keep that in mind. Another really good comp for Arms Warriors right now is Turbo Cleave, which is Enhancement Shaman, Arms Warrior Healer. Turbo Cleave is a comp that's been pretty good for a while. I don't think it's like the absolute best, but I do think that its burst is pretty scary, especially if as Turbo Cleave you have good coordination on when to run and when to play defensively when you don't have burst cooldowns available. Similarly, I think that TSG is good on Holy Death Knight Arms Warrior Healer. Similar situation where it's less bursty than Turbo, but it's going to be a little bit more of a grind them down comp with AoE pressure, plus the addition of Necrotic Strike from your Unholy DK, where it's going to absorb healing, and then as an Arms Warrior, you already have a Mortal Strike, and then Sharpened Blade on top of that. It's going to be really hard to heal through Necrotic Strike stacks, and it's going to help you build a lot of pressure for your team. But with that, I think that is probably a pretty good start for you guys in a 7.1.5 Arms Warrior PvP guide. Hopefully this information is helpful to you guys, and once again, for things like macros and whatnot, feel free to refer back to the Fury PvP guide, because it'll give you an idea of how to write macros, because they're pretty much all the same. But all things considered, like I said, hopefully it was helpful to you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I definitely appreciate you guys watching, and by all means, continue to let me know what content you guys would like to see. It is a priority of mine to continue to keep the YouTube channel going strong, even when I'm pushing for a high rating near the end of the season. You know, guides, montages, character videos, those videos are still very important to me, still on my mind, and I appreciate you guys hanging in there while we're getting these threes going at the end of the season. As always, leave any questions or comments in the comment section, and always feel free to swing by the stream, check out the gameplay, and hit me with any questions that you may have on there as well. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!